Hello, everyone, and welcome to another brand new episode of the learning series by Juno School of Business. So, as you all know, people who've been on these platforms for long, this is a platform wherein we discuss skills that would aid your corporate journey and make you a better sales professional. And we all know that sales is one of the most rewarding careers that one can undertake. And at Juno School, it is actually our endeavor that we want to shape better sales professionals for tomorrow. In fact, I'm sure we all know that sales is one of the most important functions of any organization, and it is us, we the salespeople, who are the ones who's actually driving it for every organization and significantly contributing to revenue generation. More so, it's a human desire for every individual to grow in life, right? And that's what we always target at and we always believe in. So today's session, we would be talking about navigating complex enterprise sales. If I talk about Juno School, as I told you that it's our endeavor that we want to shape aspiring sales consultants to become better, and also people who are in the vertical of sales, how do they sharpen those skill sets to become great sales consultants? So we have customized an 8-week course, which is an amalgamation of experiential learning, interaction with industry leaders that we have on every Saturday, and of course, coupling it up with placement support, right? So, taking that in mind, let me welcome today's guest. So, today we have Sunny. So, Sunny has had held strategic positions in enterprise sales typically, and he's worked with organizations like Wingify, Audacity, Innovator, One Direct, and his entire career has been into navigating these complex enterprise sales. Now, why do I call it complex? Because there are a lot of stakeholders involved, and people in this forum who are actually in enterprise sales would understand this. And people who want to join sales would actually want to know that what are those finer points which one should keep in mind when you are dealing with enterprise sales. So, Sunny, thank you so much for squeezing out time for us on this Saturday afternoon, being a weekend. And I'm sure your experience and insights will help all of us in this forum to understand that how do we handle those tricky situations when it comes to enterprise sales.
So I was saying, essentially, we talk about enterprise sales as complex, but it's not as complex as kind of getting on meetings while you are babysitting. So that's exactly what I'm doing right now. I have a couple of kids in the other room, and but let me share my screen as well.
Sure.
So just before we go ahead, I just wanted to ask people if how many of you guys are currently in enterprise sales per se, or how many people know what exactly an enterprise sales is. So essentially, I mean, I typically start with this, welcome to sales. And then the first question that I ask is, did you guys on the call know that you would ever want to get into sales while you were still studying? Because the only reason I ask this question is because we as, or probably India as an country, we do not have an education culture for sales. And Juno probably is one of the first guys to come up with a solution to this particular problem statement that we have. And then 90% of the people somehow get into sales, and then once they crack a deal, they think that, hey, this is cool, right? And you taste success, you get commissions, and then you decide to stick to sales. And then you start learning the finer nuances of sales as a skill, right? A lot of people say that sales is a flair that you're born with, or probably it comes naturally to you, which is not correct. Ideally, sales is a skill which can be taught as well as learned by anybody. Irrespective of the path that you took to sales, welcome to the sales. You guys have the most important job in the entire organization. Essentially, why I say the most important job, Himadri briefly touched upon it, because sales guys are the guys who are responsible for bringing in the revenue for the organization. And then essentially all the tech folks, all of that, HR, operations, everybody gets paid that is dependent on sales, right? So that's the primary or the most important job in the entire company, being in sales. So I'll just take a pause and see if we have any questions. Cool. So what is enterprise sales all about? So people who have an idea or have worked with tech companies or SaaS ecosystem, they would know that enterprise sales is probably essentially selling to the organizations, which are like enterprise sales is also in three different buckets. The first one is the likes of, let's say, a Freshdesk or a Zendesk, who would have certain plans which are on their website. You just go there, sign up, and then kind of get done with it, right? You have bought their product. So that is transactional sales, even though it's enterprise, but it is transactional. And then is assisted sales, which means that there is a sales guy who would assist you in signing up rather than kind of getting into the entire process. The third one is the most important. When you are getting into that particular conversation, not to sell. So essentially, in the third bucket, if you think the job of an enterprise sales guy is persuading the customer to buy, that is not the job. So I've just listed down the top 4 points, what the job exactly is about. As a sales guy, you need to create an interest in the customer's mind for potentially considering to buy your product. That is the first stage, that you spark their interest. And how do you do that? You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to listen to them very carefully and very patiently. And you should be able to identify what are the pain points or the problems that your product is selling. Your product is solving for them. One is solving for them, and the other one is must solve. Must solve is the most important part, which means that unless you are able to define that, yes, my product is solving your problem, and this is how it would impact the ROI or your KRAs, only then you'll be able to establish value for the customer and be able to strike a rapport and sell the product. And then you need to be on your toes. You need to be so witty that you can, on the fly, relate to customers' business journey, identify where the product solves the problem. So essentially, when you are in that particular conversation, in the second point, I mentioned that you need to be able to listen very carefully. While you're listening to the customer might end up mentioning very, very briefly about a particular problem statement that they're trying to solve. But that particular problem statement is the biggest problem statement. The customer also might not know that this could be a big problem statement. You need to be able to identify that, be aware of the ecosystem that that particular customer is in, and then map out your product capabilities to how you are adding the value to their ecosystem. And the fourth one is you need to be a brilliant project manager as well, because you need to project manage so the entire purchasing process. So when I say project manage the purchasing process, because it is a complex sale, you need to be on your toes like every step in the sales process, so that, and you need to be able to manage that with internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, all of the people. And just to give you an idea of how complex it is. So this is essentially the entire process of enterprise sales, right? Right from the lead generation part, and then the entire sales process happens, implementation and go live, and then you need to retain that particular customer and grow as well, right? In this particular, see, if you see enterprise account executive, which means it's a sales guy, right? Right from lead generation to growth and retention, you are playing an important part in all the four stages here, right? When I say lead generation, why you are playing a part in lead generation? You need to sync up with marketing as well. You need to sync up with the inside sales teams, because you are going out in the market, talking to the customers, identifying the pain points. That's when you need to take that particular learning, come back to marketing and the inside sales team, help them define the right messaging or communication for any future campaigns that they are running, or probably cold calling that they are doing, all of that stuff, right? Because you learn a lot from talking to the customers. You bring all of that back, so that when marketing team is talking again or sales development is talking again, they are exactly tackling those problem statements that the customer is sharing with you, right? And it would help you in generating your leads, your pipeline, in a much better way than just going out with basically product collateral, right? And then when you are in the sales process, you need to align with multiple stakeholders from the customer side. If it's a tech product, there is a possibility that a CIO might be involved, head of IT might be involved. And since it's a tech product, you are implementing it in their environment, or even if they are buying SaaS, there is a possibility that security and compliance would be involved. Procurement would be involved, legal would be involved. There would be multiple teams from the customer side who would be involved in that particular conversation. And how do you define who you are talking to and who you want to set them up for a conversation from within your organization? You need to, in addition to your organization, who heads legal, who is the right person to talk from legal? If there is a question from security compliance, who do I go to internally and get that sorted? Uh, if it's a tech or a product demo that you have to give, as a sales guy, you can give the demo, right? But when it comes to deep diving into tech questions at the time of demo, you need to be aligned with solution architects or probably solution engineers, as we call it, so that you are able to answer all the questions, or probably even if not answer, you have the right audience from your side as well, who's taking down notes, and then be able to come up with a solution for that particular conversation, right? And then you can go back to the customer and say, hey, we discussed this in our call, and then here is my response for you. Let me know if you want to get on another call, right? And then implementation go live. Once you are done with, this is by far the biggest piece of the puzzle. Once you are done with this, implementation go live. Here as well, there is a little bit of overlap, if you see, because once you hand it over to the customer success, you need to be sure that, okay, you promised XYZ as a part of your sales process. Does the customer success align with that? And that's the overlap right here with enterprise account executive and customer success. You need to involve these guys as well pretty early in the conversation, so that they are on the same page, because these are the guys who are delivering it for you. Your success depends a lot on the success of these guys. And then once implemented, you need to be sure that, okay, it's working fine, all of that. And you need to be able to strike multiple conversations with other people within that particular organization and see where the growth potential is, and how can you grow that particular account and retain that particular account. And all of these roles are internal roles which you need to align with. Questions? No questions so far?
Guys, if you have any questions, please ask. Because, enterprise sales is one of those things that you might be working for, or maybe you would be working for any one of the organizations in the future. So any question that you have around how do you handle different stakeholders when you're selling a particular product type, please feel free to ask any questions.
Cool. While you guys think of the questions, we have a Q&A session, I believe, at the end. And then we can take up the questions there as well. How do we navigate this entire complex situation, right? To navigate any particular problem, we need to look for a solution. And for that, we need to have a strategy, process, or a framework in place, right? Uh, there are multiple frameworks when it comes to enterprise sales. There are multiple organizations who have created their own frameworks as well. But here's the process that I follow. And this is one of, I've been fortunate enough to have gone through multiple trainings and have picked this up from one of those organizations as well. So it's called MEDDIC, MEDDICC, where M stands for metrics. So when I was talking about identifying the right problem areas for your potential customer, right? While you are identifying those problem statements, you need to be able to quantify those as well. And when you are quantifying that, you would be able to relate it to how it would impact their business in a positive way. Just give me a minute.
चार्ज हो रही होती है ना, वो गाड़ी चार्ज का चार्जर देखना, वो चल ही नहीं रहा, वो चार्ज नहीं हो
Betu,
रही।
I'll come after 1 hour. Don't come here again. Sorry, guys. So he was not able to locate the charger to his car. Anyways, so I was at metrics. You need to be able to quantify the impact of the problem statement that you have, and then be able to relate it to how it would positively impact the business landscape that they have, whether it is in terms of ROI, whether it is in terms of cost savings, whether it is the number of days that you are decreasing for them to achieve a particular task. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to identify a problem, positive business outcome for them. E is the economic buyer. So when we talk about the entire organization, when it comes to enterprise sales, there are 3 key sets of people that we need to look for in the beginning. The first is the economic buyer. Economic buyer is the topmost guy. You need to know who has the budget, who would be signing your check. He does not need to be involved in day-to-day conversations, but at the same time, he needs to know that, hey, you are having a conversation with their organization. So you need to be in his know-how, but not necessarily in every conversation. But you need to know who is signing your check. The first D is decision criteria. How are they trying to decide on which product to buy? What are the parameters that they are looking at? Is cost a factor? Or probably there could be bigger organizations coming out with an RFP where they mention that, hey, you need to have an XYZ revenue, you need to be in business for the last 5 years. So all of that you need to identify very early on in your conversation, because if you don't identify this and you get into a conversation, you spend about 2 to 3 months figuring out a solution, or probably reaching a stage where you think that you might be able to win this particular account. And then you come to know that, hey, I don't even qualify for this because this is their decision criteria and I don't fulfill that particular criteria, right? You need to be able to identify this particular thing very early, and so that you don't end up wasting a lot of time on a potential deal which might fall through because of this. The fourth one is decision process. How are they going to evaluate the product? Who are the people who would be evaluating the product? What is their selection criteria if you end up making to the top 3 or top 2? And when are they purchasing it? Basically, identifying the timeline, right? So this is a much more evolved version of fairly early framework called BANT, which is budget, authority, need, and timeline. Uh, a lot of that comes in the decision process itself. And then is I, identified pain. So you have identified the problem that they are trying to solve, but what pain is that problem, or the solution to that problem would solve for them, right? Is it immediate? Are there any factors which would act as a catalyst in terms of expediting your sales process? You need to be able to champion that as well. The first C is champion. Champion is the guy who has access to the economic buyer. And then he is the guy who would help you in getting conversations started with multiple stakeholders within the organization. And then he is the one who would take you to the economic buyer to get your check signed. So you need to identify your champion early on. It could be a junior guy, it could be a senior guy, but a champion and an economic buyer are rarely the same person. They are different people, but very rarely same. In smaller organizations and startups, it could be a possibility that the decision maker and the champion is both the founder or the CEO. But in bigger organizations, 99% of the times, they are different people. And then the last C is competition. You need to be well aware that the product that you are selling would have competition in the market, and you need to be able to identify who you are competing against, so that when you are having a conversation, how you perform better versus them without naming the competitor, that would be like your strong case in the organization. I see I have a question before I move on to the next one. During the sales process, how do you keep a balance between your internal champion and decision maker, so that one does not step on the wrong foot and devalue the stakeholders sale through? So this is a classic case. You need to be able to reach out to the economic buyer only when you think that you are not getting a good response from the champion. And if you're not getting a good response from the champion, in that case, your identification of the champion was wrong in the first place. Because the person you call a champion should be a person, irrespective of whether you are going ahead with the product, or whether you're going ahead with the deal, or are there any problems. He should be able to come back and tell you upfront, honestly, that, hey, it might take this much time, or we are calling it off, we are not procuring a product. But if that guy is stalling your conversation and not letting you reach the economic buyer, then he's not the right champion for you. Does that answer the question? So let's move on to the next one. So these are the primary stages as per the process. So this is the buyer's process. These are the stages that we were talking about: lead generation, sales process, implementation and go live, retention and growth, where I showed you this particular internal stakeholder management, how it aligns with the buyer's process. So this is purchasing journey. They identify the needs and investigate multiple tools within the market. They define their requirements and confirm what products fit their need. Then they procure, finalize, onboard and go live, and then start capturing the ROI or value. How it translates to the pipeline stage for an enterprise sales guy is this. While they are doing their needs and investigation, this is where in the pipeline stage, we call it research and discovery. So in this marketing, sales, development, all of the people are involved while they are researching on potential customers. When we call it an ideal customer profile, right? So let's say we have a product which solves marketing problem, or probably if I talk about my current organization, so we need to be able to identify the right set of people who are trying to solve for their website conversion rate optimization, right? So this is the research that we do. And then is discovery. When you start the conversation with the prospect, that's when you go here and start asking the right set of questions to the customer. And then this is basically you trying to see if you want to qualify this opportunity or not. Once you are done with discovery, qualify the opportunity, that's when we come here. And this is, again, the longest part of the process. Scoping and go, no go. This is where 70% of the task happens. This is when you go to and fro with the customer, identify the goal, pain points, problems areas, all of that. And then I have another document which outlines all the tasks that are associated with each and every stage of this. And then is procurement and legal. And then out for signatures, then they adopt the process, and then you engage with them and scale up the entire process. And sure. And then let me, so these are the tasks within the stage, right? So research and discovery, right? So these are when you are doing a research for a specific account, you need to be able to build a list of all the key roles. And then you also see what are the current positions that they are hiring for. If you're selling a tech product, how many developers, engineers that they have. And then out of this particular list, you identify who are your top targets within that account. And then you start researching at an individual level into your top targets. There is something called smoke report. Smoke report is a list of all of this. You put out in a document, and that's what you call a smoke report, which essentially is like a kunji for that account, right? Kunji, everybody knows, right? It's a Hindi for guide. So it's like a small ready reckoner kind of a document for you, which essentially would contain all the information for that particular account. So that if anybody, your manager, your leadership, anybody from your team asks for a specific information on that particular account, you have that particular information right here. And then you start creating custom messaging for those targets, schedule meetings, qualify the lead, capture notes, and define next actionable items, and then move to the next stage or disqualify. And then is the discovery process. Create complete pre-caller plan with goals. Now, what is a pre-call planner? This is what typically is a pre-call planner. Which organization, what is the opportunity size, date, Who are the people who are participating from your side? Who are the customer participants? What are the objectives of the meeting? What do we want out of the conversation? Customer research, do your homework on the company, how many people, website, social media, press release, competition, research on the meeting participants, LinkedIn, web, social. Are there any other opportunities? You need to be able to have the command of your message based on all the information that you have here. What we already know, what we need to find out, what questions will you ask? You need to write down everything in the document here. And then you should also be able to identify that if they don't buy your product or go with your product, what would be the negative consequences for them? How to uncover the negative consequences? You write down all the questions here in collaboration with your leadership or your manager. And then based on this, you define your own capabilities and metrics as an organization. And then you have proof points, which are nothing but case studies for the people or the customers you have worked in the past. You know the customer, you know the problem that they solved, the solution that you gave, and the results. And then how are you opening that particular meeting, right? Purpose, process, payoff. You identify the agenda, define, make the introductions, and then start off. Essentially, again, the reason for the call, what is the agenda, what is in it for them, write it down. I mean, we typically get on customer calls without any notes or anything with what we have in our head. But this is, if you start following this particular thing, this is what I was calling, when I said sales can be a skill which can be learned or taught. If you start following this, everything starts following in place for you. And then closing the meeting, you need to, at the time of closing the meeting, before getting off conversation, you need to identify what are the next steps for you. It is a quantifiable next step that, hey, I am going to give you a call at 4 p.m. next week on Thursday. That's when we would discuss A, B, and C. This is how the next step should look like. And then on the call, you ask, और किससे मिलना है? Who would be involved in decision process to move forward? Have you identified your champion or economic buyer yet? If not, then ask that particular question. Not who is the champion, but who is the economic buyer. So this is more like a detailed pre-meeting planner. Make it for all the accounts that you have, like every account. And then is sure, I have those PPTs. I'm not able to. So within the discovery, like when I showed you a pre-call planner, once you have that, you should be able to identify all of this, right? Metrics would come here, competitive landscape, C would come here. You have identified the economic buyer, customize the pitch deck, all of that stuff. And then this is scoping and no-go. Create coaches. Coaches is another interesting person who would be in that particular organization. This would be a relatively junior guy. You build a great rapport with him. He would help you in identifying or helping you navigate the organization. He would be the guy you can go to and say that, hey, can you help me find out who are the other vendors that they're talking to? You should be comfortable enough to ask these kind of questions with the coaches. Coaches typically act as your friends within the organization who would help you with multiple insights. How are you creating a champion? You can convert your coach into a champion. You have identified the positive business outcomes in the pre-meeting planner, validate that with the stakeholders, present your solution to them, identify the range of scope, socialize with the customer, engage customer success right now, introduce them to the customer, present your pricing agreement, and validate on the decision process, paper process, legal with the champion, and start preparing for a meeting where you will either get a yes or a no. Now, in this meeting, you are meeting the economic buyer. Complete the meeting, validate all the earlier validations that you did here with the champion, with economic buyer. Now here you validate your KPIs metrics, confirm if there are other opportunities, discuss your reference cases, joint PR marketing, and summarize the entire deal in writing with the economic buyer over an email, send it to him. And then procurement and out for signatures, alert your internal legal and finance teams, engage the customer's procurement. So essentially all of that, validate paper and document process, be prepared with objection handling questions from legal, ongoing conversations with economic buyer champion on deal progression, and keep identifying any blockers that you see. Identify any legal blockers, re-initiate the commercial model, complete the security or data privacy agreement if that is applicable, and then send the document out for signatures, follow up with all of that, and a formal handover to customer success gets done. And then is adopt, engage, and scale. So this is where kickoff happens. And then when it comes to engage and scale, bi-weekly calls with the customers, quarterly business reviews, start doing your groundwork for expansion, ask them for the next set of customer references, 6-month check-in with the economic buyer, in-person meeting preferably, and then introduction to marketing, keep renewing and keep growing. And during the entire process, keep learning, unlearning, and learning again. And
So
another
once the client is
interesting
on
thing
board,
that
you
you
can take
can
down the
do
website.
while you are doing this, you have created as yes. And then once you have, there is a pre-meeting planner that is there. You have created this. Then you can create your account close plan with dates. So for example,
Sunny, Sunny, you're on mute. We couldn't hear whatever you said in the last couple of minutes.
no, I was just saying that is my screen visible again?
Yeah, it is.
Cool. So you can create your own account close plan with all of the tasks. You can define a due date for every task that is there. Key learners, who are the owners for this, right? Onboarding team at Novartis, Sunny, and then Sachin internally in my team. Novartis to discuss key KRAs, who are the key stakeholders for this particular task, owners, what is the status, requirement scoping, Sunny, complete, identify timelines for onboarding, Sunny, complete. So define a date and define the status. So this would keep you in check. So these documents are over and above the sales CRM that you guys use. It could be Pipedrive, it could be Salesforce, it could be anything, but these documents are your personal documents where you keep yourself in discipline, and then all the notes are automatically tracked into the sales CRM. And then after you're done with the pre-meeting planner, you can create a document like this, which is customer name. Exactly all the data points that we were capturing here have been captured here, right? Who are the people, customer's background, description and quantification of pain points, description of after state positive business outcomes, what are the capabilities that are required, what are the metrics that they would measure us at, and what are the proof points. You have all of this ready. And then the last slide that I have is what does it take to be an A player in enterprise sales? So after every successful call or customer interaction, you need to be laser focused on the customer, gather as much information as you can, identify the personas within the organization very early. Who is your coach? Who is your champion? Who is your buyer? You need to have a solid research hypothesis with you. You need to be able to identify potential pain, align the value proposition, which is how does your product align with the identified pain. For the identified pain, are there any success stories with the existing customers that we have done? Share it with them. And then when you are ending the call, you need to have specific call to action, next steps, date, time, and action. So that's pretty much an introduction to enterprise sales on why it is complex, how do you navigate it using a process or a framework, what are the additional resources or documents you can leverage. So I've consciously not added the list of tools that you can use, tools like Alusha or Grammarly or all of that, because those lists are available on the internet like every place that could help you in gathering more information and doing that. And but I've just kept it simple as a process, and that's pretty much about it. And I guess we have 15 minutes for a Q&A session.
Anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask Sunny. So I think, Sunny, we have a question from Rohit. I think he's trying to type something on the chat box.
Sure. Recommended tools, sales tech stack that you recommend for B2B sellers. I can share a list of all the tools that I use with Juno. And then when they are sharing the presentation, they can share that with you.
Thanks so much, Sunny. Thank you. Guys, any other questions, any real life case study or any situation that you've got stuck in the past or you foresee, please ask so that, you get clarity and you exactly know how to navigate out of that situation.
Sunny, I have another one.
Sure.
So I've been in B2B space for quite some time, and I still find days when I am struggling with making the best use of Sales Navigator, or let's say LinkedIn itself. So how does a veteran B2B enterprise sales executive use LinkedIn on a day-to-day basis? And what are a few major reasons that you would use LinkedIn?
So LinkedIn Sales Navigator, essentially, if you are fortunate to have access to Sales Navigator, if your organization has given you that, In that case, the first set is that map your ideal customer profiles, and then within Sales Navigator, create a list with all those ideal customer profiles that you have. So once you put in the organizations, it would ask you for multiple personas as well. You add in the personas, and that's when you start getting a lot of information about those accounts, about those people. You would get information if there is a press release, you would get an information if there is a company announcement, you would get information if there is a competition announcement which has named that particular organization. And then you look at your messaging or communication that you're going to the customer, that how do you leverage that particular information in your day-to-day conversations with that particular prospect, right? So for example, if you get a news on a new contract, $100 million contract with a particular organization in the US, you know that particular information, you know who the organization is, right? And then you identify who are the people named in that particular article or a press release. Now you have this particular information. See how you can leverage this information in your communication. You can send out a congratulatory email and include the other people as well who have been named in that particular uh, press release. And if that information is stalled, that might prompt them to at least reply with a thank you or initiate a new thread again, right? So, and when you are adding new people to it, there is a possibility that those guys also come back with a thank you note. And then if they drop in a thank you note, you start interacting one-on-one with them and see if you can build them into a champion or a coach, and they can help you navigate. And if not, then start looking for other pieces of content or information that you can leverage in the next set of conversations that you're going to have. And along with Sales Navigator, create a Google alert as well, so that as and when the news drops, you keep a notification, you get a notification on your Gmail as well or your email as well, informing you of any specific development. You can have multiple filters or multiple keywords as a part of your Google alert organization, or even for a particular person. When we're talking about top targets, right, within that particular account, who are the top 10 people that you want to get connected to? Create a Google alert with their names, and then wherever they are mentioned on the internet, you would start getting notifications. And then you backtrack and see how do you want to use that. Does that answer your question? And spending 30 to 40% of your daytime on LinkedIn is always a good idea.
Thank you,
Just
sir.
reading about your accounts. Especially in a startup, say Series A, 50 people, when is the right time to hire an enterprise sales head? Should the co-founders lead it with a bunch of AEs and SDRs? Absolutely. Because you have got to a point where you have gone from 0 to 1, and then 1 to 10 is tough. In that particular ecosystem, what I believe is that founders who have created that particular product know the best on what problem are they trying to solve. They have the best experience within the organization. And then if you hire smart AEs, then they working with the founders would eventually lead to getting a VP of sales or VP of enterprise sales from within the bunch of AEs that you have, right? because they would have experienced firsthand on conversations that are being done with the founders, and they would have it in their DNA uh, in that particular time frame. But if you hire an external enterprise sales head, it could be beneficial in the sense that he would be able to set up the processes, framework, strategy, all of that in place. But if you expect them to start going to customer meetings and adding the same value as founders do, that would rarely happen. And the ideal way is, in addition to AEs and SDRs, hire somebody for sales enablement so that founders do not spend a lot of time in the administrative tasks. Start documenting everything. I see a lot of startups essentially still relying on lesser technology, invest in processes, invest in frameworks, invest in training the AEs and SDRs on the best practices, and get a sales enablement guy rather than a VP of sales. So that's what my thought process is. It might be different, it might be right, it might be wrong for different ecosystems, but that's how I think about it. If I started my own organization in some time, and if I would not have been a sales guy, I would have probably gone this way. Or I don't know. Because if I would have not been a sales guy, I don't know what would I have been doing. How can the enterprise sales process help minimize the customer churn? This is with respect to customer success. End of the day, retention matters. Absolutely, retention matters. And that's why, as a part of this particular process, involve the customer success guys very early on in your discussions with the customer, so that customer success, before you introduce them to the customer for implementation, are already on the same page as a sales guy. What you're promising, they know what you're promising. Whatever arguments, disagreements, agreements have to happen between a customer success and account executives happen here. You don't go with a false promise or something the customer success does not agree to in this particular stage. And when this happens, chances of churning reduce a lot. But at the same time, there could be product capabilities, there could be lapses at customer success, and there could be multiple other reasons for the churn. You need to be able to identify the right set of red flags that you keep seeing, right? Is the customer interacting with you? Are you having the right set of are you asking the right questions as a customer success guy to the customer? Are you leveraging your salesperson to come into the conversation at the right time? Is the engagement there on the platform? All of these things you need to take care of. So yeah, if not the perfect ICP, but still a good. So when you are, so I get this question a lot. When you're defining your ICP, right? So you define your ICP in 3 different tiers. Tier 1 is an absolute ICP. Tier 2 is where there is a certain overlap. Uh, and tier 3 is which is parallel ecosystems or parallel industries to your ICP. Right? If it's in tier 2, absolutely invest time. If it's in tier 3, depending on your conversations with the customer in the first 2 or 3 calls, as a sales guy, you need to be able to identify whether you want to take this conversation forward or not. This is where qualification becomes real important. And if you think that out of the 5 points that you need to get a yes to. You don't get a yes to one, don't invest time there. Or if it's a essentially team with multiple people, you pass on that particular opportunity or that particular conversation to the SDRs to bring it to a level where you have confidence that this might close. But as an account executive, don't spend time on opportunities where you even think that there is a 10% chance this might not close. But even if you have opportunities which are 100% confident that they might close, always keep in mind Murphy's law. If there is, I mean, there are multiple versions of Murphy's law, but what it says is if there is something that has to go wrong, it will go wrong. Just believe in that as well. There are, till the time you don't get signatures on the place, don't consider the deal closed. Don't become a lot confident at the stage where you say, okay, commit and not closed. Just stay on top of that as well.
Yeah. So guys, any other questions, or if you don't have any questions, that we would want to wind it up for the day. Okay, Sunny, I think that there are no more questions in store. So thank you so much once again for squeezing out time on a weekend, and I can definitely understand that you had to really work out to squeeze that 1 hour out. Thank you so much for everybody. Thank you so much everybody for joining in. And just wanted to reiterate that these webinars that we conduct are a routine feature, and you can be part of them every Saturday from 12 to 1. So if you want to gain insights on sales, or you're interested in building a great sales career, do block your calendars for every Saturday and be a part of these learning series. You can know more about us at junoschool.org, or always schedule a chat with us at hello@junoschool.org. I've shared the links on the chat box. And thank you so much for attending. Have a great weekend ahead, and let's connect on next Saturday at 12 sharp. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.